Welcome everybody. Doesn't that look amazing? I think The Guardian called it a wonderful, horny revenge drama. And that's The Guardian, so you can just imagine what everyone else has made of it. It is fabulous, and it is one of the reasons that we're here today to celebrate the wonderful woman who was Barbara Taylor Bradford, her amazing debut novel, A Woman of Substance, an absolute classic, and also the fact that it has come back to our screens for the first time in 40 years in this super sexy, cannot stop watching it, addictive new television adaptation. So Jane, I'm going to start with you because you interviewed Barbara. Tell us a little bit about those encounters. What did you take away about her drive and her success?
No, I just think it's worth saying that when you meet someone like Barbara Taylor Bradford, she was put together. Yes. She looked amazing, and I'm from the northwest of it. I'm from Liverpool, where it does matter what you look like. Women are meant to look smart, and if you don't look smart, you're going to be judged for it. Now, I was a bit of an embarrassment in my family, still am. But Barbara Taylor Bradford absolutely worked that I am my success.
Yes.
And she wore it, but in a really good way.
Yeah.
And I think I know the adjective formidable is quite often applied to women, and sometimes it's done in a judgmental way,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be. And yes, I suppose you could say she was formidable, but she wasn't glacial.
No.
She was properly polite, and she was decent, and she was promoting a novel that came out, I think, in 2017, 2018, something like that. And she just looked amazing. She was completely on it. She did her job. She was dignified. She was thoroughly professional. And I was left gawping at her, and I mean this, at her majesty.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
She must then have been, what, in her 80s?
Yeah.
And still did it, still wore it really well. And I mean, you absolutely have to have respect for people, and particularly for women.
Yeah.
Like her,
I know.
who had earned it. She'd earned all that.
She really had, and I think that's such a good point. And I think, interestingly, which we will come back to possibly at a later point, when somebody wrote her biography, they brought up or uncovered the fact that she was possibly the granddaughter of a marquis.
Right.
And his line of sort of marquises before him had been a viceroy of India and a prime minister of Great Britain, which made perfect sense to me. However, she only engaged with that story because she was concerned about what it meant for her mother and her mother's childhood, where she'd been in the workhouse. She knew that she had made her own success and that she was herself a success. She didn't have any interest in the past in that sense. And I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah.
Harry and Ronnie as novelists, especially because you both deal in family dynamics, and your most recent book is set in the past, a big house, and Harry, you're writing a trilogy, and you both deal in sort of the secrets, the betrayals. What do you think the key hooks are in this story that make it most compelling and that explain why it's still relevant today?
It just doesn't let up, does it? It's sort of almost Dickensian, really, and it's cut a huge cast of characters, but also just the way we move through every period of her life, and there's such a massive engine going through the whole thing. And there's two things I always say to people who want to write, if I ever teach writing, and that is find your voice and love what you're writing. And the fact that she did both of those things, you hear her when you're reading it, and you can tell she's absolutely loving every single moment, and that she's sitting down at her typewriter, I guess,
yes,
in those days,
typewriter.
and just having brainstorm after brainstorm after brilliant idea, and go, I'm going to pull that in. But yes, how she edited it all on a typewriter without a computer program, I do not know. You might know better than me.
Well, I mean, she used to often write in that she had the most extraordinary work ethic, to go back to Jane's point.
Yeah.
Right through to the end of her life, she would get up and write, often from 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., write for an hour or two, make Bob's breakfast, have breakfast with him, wave him off, and then call me, bit of a chat. But she would write, and then she would walk her dogs or get up and move around, and then she would sometimes edit in the afternoon, sort of print it, you know, on the, not even printed out, you know, the sheets from the typewriter would then be edited by hand in the way of.
And then how did you then receive those, if she edited them by hand?
Yes, and most of the time I worked with her, luckily, she had a typist she would sort of send all of that to, who would, when I say type it up, I mean actually put it onto a computer disk in the early days, you know, send it as an electronic file. And for her, that was her sort of job done, you know, where she would send it off and then someone else would deal with how the electronic bit got dealt with. I mean, it was amazing.
And how did she receive notes, if you had any, or did you not?
Now, to begin with, I was absolutely petrified.
Yeah.
She'd worked with the same editor since A Woman of Substance, who was still at HarperCollins when I got there.
Wow.
So when I got there, I acted more as her publisher, and she had an editor who would have these very, very long transatlantic phone calls with her, going through every single page. And that seemed to me, you know, useful, but perhaps a little bit inefficient time-wise. And when, very sadly, that editor became ill and then died, I had to step into those big shoes. But what I discovered immediately is she loved nothing better than talking about the book and what she could change about it and what might make it better. She didn't necessarily want to do all of the things I suggested, but she loved to talk about her books. She would always have the idea for the next one brewing in her head before we'd really published one. She'd be saying, I've got this character in my head, he's talking to me. And she loved an editorial chat. She loved to throw ideas around, to explore plot ideas. She loved the research and the historical backgrounds to some of her period novels. And she was an absolute joy to talk to, because she, to your point, absolutely loved what she did. And Harry, I mean, I know you have dug quite deep in your novels into the ways that family secrets and betrayal ripple through the generations. And did you think, you know, part of the appeal of this is it's not saccharine, is not sentimental about that?
I think that's exactly actually, and I've been, because I reread it last week and earlier this week, and I was completely swept up in it again. And it's a genre fiction that we don't, I think, come across that much anymore, which is the heroine who has to succeed despite all the odds. And this sort of sense of drive and purpose that you get in Gone with the Wind or in Lace, or where they just have to do what they have to do. You just all the time sense, and you can spend a lot of time saying Emma Hart is Barbara Taylor Bradford, and you were saying earlier, like, it's uncanny how much Brenda Blethyn seems a little bit like BTB, and that's, you know, that's kind of painful and wonderful at the same time. But I think that idea that, like, Emma Hart, just, she will do whatever it takes.
Exactly.
And we live in an age of self-care, which I feel has become another tool to oppress women. You know, that, like, people are like, you must take care of yourself. I'm like, I don't have time, I need to go on. And I think that's what I admire so much about BTB.
Oh my God.
But also what I love about the book, because there's this sort of sense of just purpose. And the last line is, you know, I think it's Blackie O'Neill says, you know, what do you want, or whoever it is, and she says, I want to endure.
I love
You're like, oh God. But it is that. It's such a good last line.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
And
And
it's
it's something that women have to endure, don't they?
Yeah.
Like men don't.
And it's a woman of substance, like women endure.
yeah.
So good.
And I think that's a really good point, because I am slightly obsessive about the way that women's writing is categorized as women's fiction and dismissed. And the book was mentioned on a TV show last month in passing, but it was referred to as a big romance. And I wanted to sort of smash the TV screen and go, it's really not. She really doesn't have very much romance, and she falls out very badly with her children.
And it's the opposite of a romance, really. We had those conversations a lot when we were developing the show and kind of continuing to talk about it. And I think that's what appealed to me so much at the beginning, is that there is romance in it, and there's sex in it, and there are marriages, and there are men, and she has an awful lot of kind of liaison and kind of things of that nature throughout her life. But if there is a kind of central relationship in it, it's between her and her work, isn't it? And it's her and her ambition. And it's the love of her life, absolutely. And she would be, she would be, you know, that would be the thing that she would miss the most. That would be the thing she would put above everything else, you know, and at times above her children. And I think you're right that that's another conversation that we had about how is that possible to make that sympathetic? How, for a woman, you know, for a man, when we watch Succession, we're not ever saying, why does Logan Roy not put his children first?
No.
Yeah.
But
Why isn't he at home?
you know, absolutely.
Yeah.
But of course, with Emma Hart, you do kind of have that thing of, well, she's got children, and throughout her life, it's obviously, as it is for any of us who have children and a career, it's a constant kind of back and forth. But I think probably the career would win out in Emma Hart's case.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
And I think the sidebar, really interesting Devil Wears Prada conversation now is the villain Miranda, or is the villain Nate, the whingy boyfriend?
I've been reading that
says,
as well.
why do you have to go to
Why do you have to
work
go out
so
all the
much?
time? But they haven't put him in the new film, I gather,
No.
for that reason, because I think he was so unpopular. So
It is funny when you rewatch Devil Wears Prada. He's such an unattractive character, and the older I get, the more I'm like, those cheekbones, Miranda. Wow, you have got it going on. Yeah, I think there's also a really interesting point that I'm deep into a Bronte phase at the moment for work reasons and just for life reasons. And I saw a preview of the film, of the Wuthering Heights film, because I was doing a thing for Penguin with it. So I saw it at a preview and was predisposed to enjoy it. And more than a lot of people I know, I absolutely loved it. But I'm so surprised by the number of people who are like, oh, but none of the romance is in it. And I'm like, what part of Heathcliff hanging his wife's dog? And it's so interesting that you can do a through line from Elizabeth Gaskell and the Brontes to a book like A Woman of Substance. I'm not saying like it's a work of the greatest quality of literature ever, but the idea of women's lives and having what you want and striving, just enduring, it's just so, and the moors, like the top of the world and everything.
So, that's all. I think this is just the quite landscape.
Wuthering Heights.
And it was published around the same time as books like The Godfather or Cain and Abel, and I don't see those being, oh, you know, you read The Godfather, it's a great romance, or have you read Cain and Abel, it's a great romance. Those are kind of allowed to just be big, epic, you know, dynastic fiction in a way that I think women's writing so often isn't, and it is so frustrating. And you kind of hope, you would have hoped 40 years on we might have moved on, but I think there is still such a temptation to just put the romance label on all of it, as you say, including Wuthering Heights, because it's got women's.
If I had a penny for everybody who said, oh, I don't read books like yours.
Yeah, I know.
Well, more fool you. Because you might learn something.
Yeah, and Barbara herself said, and I wrote this quote down, when she was being asked about these questions about the book when it was first published, the reading public of America is made up largely of women, and they want to read about women who have made a success of their lives. It's a matter of identification. Most novels concerning money and power are about men. And she just saw that, and that's where I guess Emma Hart came from.
I just thought this morning that it came out in 1979, and Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister in May of 1979. And like a lot of women of my age, I stayed up all night to wait for Margaret Thatcher to become the Prime Minister. And my maternal grandmother lived with us, and I remember she said, she bought me a portable telly, and she said, when she wins, just knock on my door. Oh, wow. I mean, she was definitely supposed, so she wouldn't have heard me, but I did knock on the door.
She knew that she was going to...
Well, I think she felt it in her waters. She had all kinds of celestial...
she was along with the liquid paraffin.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think I don't know what month The Woman of Substance came out, but it was definitely... I mean, I read it and my grandmother read it, and there was something in it.
And it was interesting, I think, at the screenings of it that I've been to, and Katherine, you may have seen this as well. There were cross-generational, you know, women bringing their daughters, women talking about watching it with their daughters.
I know. There's been a fair bit of that, I think, which is lovely to see. And I think a new generation of kind of young women or younger women are discovering it as an amazing kind of triumph over adversity story for a woman, rather than it being a romance. I mean, I think it'd be be odd to watch it for the romance. There's romance in it.
She makes a lot of mistakes, though, doesn't she?
It is. Yeah. She really does, which is why we love it. Because who wants to be friends with somebody who doesn't make any mistakes?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't see you because
I
of
know,
the
it's
shrubbery.
like Little Shop of Horrors.
So in some of the reviews, they have said that Katherine Jakeaways has made it more overtly feminist.
Oh, so I've missed that.
No, have you?
Yeah, is that, no,
It's not a criticism. I just wonder whether you did.
I don't know whether we set out to do that. I think it's pretty feminist.
Yeah, I know.
I think we've updated it inevitably, and I suppose everybody's sort of thinking has moved on, and the kind of other characters around her may be more feminist, and the kind of authorial voice. I mean, it's hard to imagine that BTB was not as feminist, but I guess, yeah. I mean, I'll take that as a huge compliment if that's the case.
It's also how things translate visually as well, that what on the page you can just describe. And I don't think she was much of a feminist, was she? She was quite like, I make Bob his, which is such a disconnect now, because actually she may not have known
I think she
it,
wrote a
but
whole
she
book
was.
about making dinner for your husband, didn't she?
Yes.
Thrilled when she never
Keeping your
mentioned
husband happy.
She was born in
husband would love it.
1933, and she was to some extent, but she really, really just believed in, forging your own path.
Yeah.
Very much, I guess, as Emma does, but without all the incredible misfortune that besets Emma. But about rising above your circumstances and making good and building something, saving your pennies and making something of your life. And that was really strong, I think, for her. But I think it's fascinating because I know, Katherine, when you were talking about it a little bit, you talked about how you also wanted the teenage sort of romance to shine off the screen so that young people connected with it more. And I think it's also interesting what you've done. I'm not sure whether I would call What's Going On with Adam and Adele and Olivia as a romance, but yeah. I think it's really interesting what you've done with that as well.
Yeah, well, we wanted to show those as very different kinds of relationships, and actually, having said it's not a romance, the Emma and Edwin thing, I think you have to absolutely buy into it because Emma does.
Yes.
And if we at any stage were going, I don't like the look of him, or he looks like a bit of a wrong one, then you wouldn't trust her. Yes. You have to absolutely believe that a 17-year-old woman as brilliant as Emma would fall for him.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to assume that everybody kind of vaguely knows what happens. I'm not giving anything away by saying that when he lets her down, you need to feel that surprise.
Yes.
If you haven't read the book before, if you haven't, if you don't know the story, you need to sort of go, oh God, and feel that heart sink, because she then spends the rest of her life.
But it's the
going
best
back to him.
best thing that happens to her.
Yes,
in a way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the kind of impetus for it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, I think
Drives her.
another thing that we talked about is, can you kind of sustain that anger for her as a, as a viewer? Can you kind of, by episode 7, still be going, and yes, I am still angry at him for doing that. And yes, you can actually, because I think you feel the real weight of how much he lets her down and how much he regrets it himself, and how for both of them it will be
But
the
you
thing they
ramp
will
it up
think
so
about.
beautifully, don't you? The whole family.
But then what we've done and what Barbara had done, and we've kind of tried to add to, is, and it's also her dad, and it's also her brother, and it's also her mother, and then she finds out this, and then that, and then the other brother, and then Gerald, and then, so it's kind of, it's a sort of, just as you think, oh, maybe she's going to sort of go, I could possibly put this to bed for a bit now, something else comes along.
and then the absolutely brilliant payoff at the end, which is set up at it's like Chekhovian locket at the beginning. It's like,
Thank you. Well, look, it's one of my big regrets that I never will now get to talk to Barbara about the kind of payoffs of those kind of little things that those kind of little engines which are put in place in the book.
So beautifully.
Which don't always pay off in the way that you expect, actually. And now we're kind of deep in the kind of nuts and bolts of it, and you kind of go, I'd so love to have been able to say to her, is that there for that reason?
Yeah.
And because we don't really know, sometimes we've had to assume, and sometimes you kind of just, you just think, well, it feels like it is, so I think should approve.
Yeah. And I think what you do so brilliantly with the Edwin thing, and apologies to anyone who hasn't seen it, but he folds so fast, and it's very like that
as in the book. We've completely followed how it is in the book.
He's so lovely, and he's so convincing. As you say, you need him to be that.
You
need to believe that he really does mean the promises he's making.
It is really filmed in Yorkshire, isn't it?
Oh, every minute
Are
of
you
it,
sure about that?
Yes.
'Cause I know that Liverpool's playing New York.
Liverpool is New York, and Beamish, which I wrongly claimed was in Yorkshire in one of the Q&As, and my husband told me off for because it isn't. But other than that, every minute of it is Yorkshire.
Right.
Yeah.
The
yeah,
landscape is stunning.
It is, it's
really
beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it is kind of reassuring that it isn't filmed in, I don't know, Latvia or somewhere. but
No,
it's-
I feel like we couldn't have held our
You
heads
couldn't
up.
have, no.
No, it's so kind of obviously, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it
Yeah,
really
it's
is stunning. And the top of the world is the Cowan Calf, it's called, just outside Ilkley. And it's, yeah, it really looks beautiful. And I think they've slightly enhanced moments of it with kind of the effects and stuff, but it's almost entirely just in the rock spaces, I think. But the rest of it is all completely real. And the moors and we did Broughton Hall, which was the house that they used in the original miniseries,
Yes.
was Fairley Hall. So we used exactly the same house. Yeah, it's
good.
That's the nice place.
yeah, it's beautiful.
And
Absolutely
Jane,
beautiful.
as a Liverpudlian, did you recognise?
Yeah.
Did
I
you
mean, it's
go,
very,
that's
very
not
well
New
done.
York.
So are the cabs
very
honking
well
on the street, all of that? That's
They're all
Liverpool.
Scouse
That's
cabs,
Liverpool,
those.
yeah. None of that's VFX. That's all real. Scouse cabs, Scouse extras wearing very tight trousers and flares.
Get out of town. That's amazing.
Sideburns, yeah, no, it's all Liverpool. Like.
Yeah,
It's good, doesn't
it is. It does look amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to
incredible.
say that some of the most underappreciated people are those people who find those,
Yes, the
setting,
locations
the
team.
location people. I mean, absolutely
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Amazing. Every single location was brilliant.
Yeah,
Did
really,
they have to
really
stick
good.
those letters up on the building, or did you CGI that in the
The
hearts?
truthfully, the skyscraper is CGI.
a little bit
yeah.
enhanced, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But the no, I think it was hearts on the bottom where she's going through the door
Oh,
on
yes,
the
yeah,
department
yeah,
store.
yeah.
Yeah, that's all stuck up.
Yeah.
And Brenda has told the story a couple of times that she was arriving in her costume and she saw the window display and she thought, oh, I like the look of that shop, it looks quite nice. I'll go in there at my lunch hour. And didn't realise it was actually the set dressing that they'd done. It was her shop with their name on it. Yeah.
That is so.
Yeah.
But just so the sorry,
Sorry,
the 70s fashions and widgets.
What a gift, though.
Absolutely.
To be able
Right.
to do those two timelines, and that's, you don't get that often in a period drama.
No.
To be able to, the kind of beautiful, sprawling, amazing kind of romantic 1911 stuff, plus the kind of beautiful camp,
Yeah.
colourful 1970s. It's just a jewel.
flares.
I think
yeah.
it could easily, I think that's one of the great things about it that sort of reflects with the book as well, that when I was an editor and when I'm trying to write, sitting at my desk and crying, what you're looking for is someone who's in control of their material. Like, it doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to be a perfect first draft, but you need to feel they believe what they've done, they've got complete conviction over it. And it is asking a lot to get away with that death scene up on top of the world.
I know, it's
if
a
you-
risk, isn't it?
It could have been so
Yeah,
badly
naff,
wrong. And I
yeah.
always think of the review of Mamma Mia that Mark Kermode did, that he was like, this is mad, he's not the target audience, went to see it. And halfway through, he said, and I listened to it quite often, he's like, I'm going with this, I'm going with it. And it's done with total conviction.
What was your sort of starting point when you were first given the book or told about the possible project,
Yeah.
whatever? Did you sit down and read it and go, okay, I can see this, or
Had you read it before?
I hadn't read it before, truthfully. No, I hadn't. Obviously, I was aware of it. I was 1975. I was born, so I was a kind of a teenager or a kind of child when it was out and when the miniseries was out. So I was aware of it, but no, I hadn't read it. And I read it. It was suggested to me. I was working with Beth Willis on something else. It was Lockdown. And she said, oh, we've got this book which I think you'd really love, and you'll have heard of it. And she told me what it was. And I was like, obviously I've heard of it. So I read it, and I was really just so taken with her as a character, actually, and with, as everybody is, and that's why we're all here, and that's why it's sustained. That's why it did so well at the time, and that's why, thank goodness, it's doing so well now, because people are just really enthralled to the character of Emma Hart and her kind of ambition and her determination and her absolute rock solid ability to succeed and be the woman that she is.
Jane, as a broadcaster, you're talking to people all the time. You're, engaging with the cultural,
The zeitgeist.
whatever. Yeah, zeitgeist.
I think
What
Jane
do you
is the
think it is that's making us love this so much at this moment?
Well, actually,
Why
can
are we falling on
Yeah.
it?
Was it? Was the? I don't know if you know this, but was the book immediately a success?
Yes.
Was it? Okay.
I think, and in fact, to qualify that slightly, it was slightly slower in hardcover, and then it was the paperback, particularly in America, that exploded.
Right.
And then Barbara did a book tour where women kept sort of rushing up to her and weeping and saying, "You've changed my life.
Okay.
This has shown me, you know, what I can make of myself."
Oh, wow.
And then it spent something like 40 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And it was #1 here, not Jeffrey Archer off #1 here.
Oh, good.
And,
That's a round of applause.
round of applause for that. So, yeah, it perhaps wasn't the day it published in hardback, but within probably the first year or so, it had become this phenomenon. Yeah.
Right. And she, how did she, do you know how she reacted to that? Was she...
I think she always expected it.
Did
There
she?
is
Wow.
That's classic.
so Emma Hart.
Self-belief.
Yeah. Well, she tried to write about 3 other, I think, sort of thrillers or something, and just put them in drawers and said they're rubbish. I can't do that. And then the figure of Emma Hart came to her, girl walking across the Yorkshire moors,
Right.
and it was the beginning of the book. She couldn't get this figure out of her head. This woman, this servant girl walking across the Yorkshire moors. And she spent 2 years writing it. She went back to Leeds, back to Armley where she'd grown up, and she did masses of research into mills and the industrial, you know, history of Leeds. And so I think that, for me, is also part of the fascination of the book, is she when you read all 800 pages, but she really understands how Leeds was built on cloth
Yeah.
and on that industry, and how poor it was, how people were living hand to mouth, where people were making money, how the mill owners were abusing that, and poured all of that into this. But when her then-to-be UK publisher met her for the first time, it was by chance. In New York, she was with another publisher who he knew, and they were introduced, and she said to him, "Oh yes, I've written a novel. It's called A Woman of Substance. It's coming out next year, and it's going to be a huge bestseller."
Wow, okay.
So she did know.
She did. Well,
It's like manifesting.
That's manifesting, yeah.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think it is right now that's making us all love this TV quite as much as we are?
I think it's, funny enough, I watched an episode of A Woman of Substance right after I'd watched Louis Theroux's Manosphere.
So it's a companion piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a real companion piece.
Yeah.
So I needed A Woman of Substance.
Yeah, yeah.
Palette
Wash your brain out.
You really did.
God. So maybe there is something to, I don't know. I mean, we all love a saga, and a sweeping saga and I'd love to know how many men have read A Woman of Substance compared to the numbers of millions of women who would have devoured it.
Yes.
And I am one of those women. I love reading, and I also just want to say, in the company of writers, what pleasure you give the rest of us. I mean,
Yes.
because I can't write a novel. I can't. I'd love to read it. I can't do it. But the amount of the hours of my life I have spent in the company of people who can write is, I really don't think we say it enough how fantastic they are. But wait, my steamy novel's coming up very soon. Brace yourself. Behind the scenes at Woman's Hour.
See me for a moment.
Talk to me.
Yeah, you're in it, Laura.
Yeah.
No, it's something that isn't said often enough, and I'm glad I've just been able to say it. I have had 2 drinks, that's probably why I'm saying it.
Have another.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love it too. Yes. Why is it? I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about other books that probably couldn't be televised. I mean, tell me, could you rewrite The Thornbirds?
Somebody else has said that. You're not the first person to tell it to me this
Well,
week.
it couldn't happen, could it? It couldn't.
I don't remember it well enough, truthfully. I just remember how handsome
Well,
he was.
lots of people in the room will be able to tell you what happened in The Thornbirds and how incredibly sexy it was.
Yeah,
but
it was very sexy.
probably unbroadcastable.
So much about that book is
It's wrong.
wrong. Yeah. and Richard Chamberlain, one of many gay men I've been in love with in my life.
Was he open gay?
No, I
He
don't.
never told me.
He kept it to himself when you were to Kevin.
Have you just outed him now?
That
was beautiful, wasn't he?
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
That's my main memory of The Thornbirds, I fear, but I don't know.
I think there's a really interesting aspect of A Woman of Substance and BTB as a wider phenomenon, which is there's a lack of self-pity. And when I think about the writers I worked with and what works in my books and what readers don't like, it's like I worked with Sue Townsend when I was a very, very baby editor. I went to her house and helped her do an Adrian Mole. I mean, that's when I was very young, but like that's like the highlight of my entire life career. And she had absolutely no self-pity whatsoever. She didn't feel so. She was blind, she was heavily diabetic, she'd had quite a tough life. And BTB, absolutely no self-pity. No, I couldn't have children. No, this didn't work out. Just this like, I will. I feel quite sorry for myself a lot of the time. Ronnie will know that you're like on your own all the time. It's very easy to fall a prey to all manner of ideas. I don't go out and talk to other people. And I have small children, and they're always there. They're just always there. They want to be fed. And that thing of like, you have to put it on. You have to like wear a cape of, you're really lucky. Like, this is such a great job. That is such a lovely thing for you to have said. And I think with her, she was just born wearing that cape. And I think we want to read stories that aren't about self-pity. The not manscaping, the maniverse. They were so sorry for themselves, those men. They were such small men. Actually, literally and figuratively, they were quite small.
She wear very tight clothing.
Very tight clothing. And I think that's what we want. And certainly, like, I'm writing book 1 of a trilogy, which is for like 70 years, and I've bitten off way too much, more than I can chew. But that idea that like you realise you're doing some bits where the heroine just feels really sorry for herself, and it doesn't cut through on the page.
You're right, Emma Hart would never feel sorry for herself.
There isn't. No, and I think it's the other thing that I would say about why it seems to be resonating now is it's such a kind of underdog story of somebody who has come from so little and just is not prepared to take, is sticking 2 fingers up, literally and metaphorically, at everybody around her who's thinking that they're better than her, or is making mistakes, or is getting things wrong, and saying she isn't worthy of kind of attention. And I think that at the moment, we're all kind of feeling, to greater or lesser degree, the kind of massive disparity between haves and have-nots, and people who should have a voice and don't, compared to the people who do have a voice and shouldn't. I just think any story at the moment where somebody's going, I've had enough of this, actually. I'm going to power on through until I make a difference, until I get myself heard. And she does. And it's a success, and she does it. And she does it, and still is able to be lovely to her, staff, and still is able to know, remember everybody's birthdays, and still all those kind of feminine things, which I absolutely don't manage to do. But on the page, Emma Hart is able to do that. Yes, she has made mistakes with her children, but she is absolutely clear of purpose, and she will not stop until she kind of, on her deathbed, says, now I've done it, and now maybe I've made a difference and made people not underestimate me. So I think it's a kind of underdog thing which feels very relevant now, in a kind of class struggle way as well as a gender way.
And weirdly, Barbara herself, as anyone here who knows her will confirm, always did remember your children's names. How old they were, what they were up to.
That's so nice.
And I think I was saying, the first time I met her, I was expecting a grande dame, a kind of very grand, very transatlantic, wealthy woman. And what I got was a really down-to-earth Yorkshire woman in a trouser suit, really warm, interested, funny, wanted to hear about me, wanted to ask questions, would remember what she'd been told, and was massively engaged with her publishing. And she always felt very modern, I think, for that reason. Although, yes, she would dress up and she was immaculate and she had the New York grooming down to a T. She was, underneath it all, someone very smiley and engaged and deeply, deeply curious. So, some of that Emma Hart, remembering, Dorman's anniversaries.
I love that detail. We're so keen to keep all of that, because she felt so real.
And when we went to Armley a couple of weeks ago, they were unveiling the blue plaque for her at the library, and I just loved hearing the stories about her as a child, where she would sort of set off, quite Matilda-esque, that she would sort of set off. She was the only person who was allowed to have 2 library cards in Armley Library, because she read so many books, and she wanted all the books, and they allowed her to have. I know, which is such a brilliant kind of detail about her, isn't it? That you just think, God, I love the thought of that.
She went to school with Anne Bennett.
It's so mad. They were in the same class at nursery. I mean, that's the fable, isn't it? I think that's true.
She did go to school with him, and then she worked with Keith Waterhouse and knew Peter O'Toole because he was a trainee photographer on the sister paper, but turned down a date to the cinema with him.
Wow.
He had bad skin and and a strong Yorkshire accent at that point, according to her. Yeah.
And did she enjoy her success? Did she?
She loved it,
Yeah.
but most of all, she loved her work. Back to the Emma Hart thing, back to, I think, part of why this is resonating, back to Devil Wears Prada. You know, she loved to work, and that was her raison d'etre. She loved Bob, and she loved her work, and she was so proud of it. And she would have written those books even without a publisher. I mean, I'm sure she would have fixed that problem quite quickly.
Bought the publisher.
Yes, yeah. But she got up in the morning and thought about her characters and thought about writing, and that was what she adored doing. And she loved to go out for dinner with friends, or, you know, go to a party, but she didn't want to stay at the party that long, because her life was her home life and her writing and her life as an author. So she was just extraordinary like
It's
that.
such a hard thing to admit sometimes as a woman, isn't it? That you really love your work and you are really like desperate to get back to your laptop. I feel like it's quite a hard sort of thing to be sympathetic about sometimes in the kind of wider world. But I love to hear that she was that. Yeah. She clearly was.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that,
Sorry.
We just want to ask you questions about her, really. Sorry. You can't ask us any more questions.
Did she ever still have a Yorkshire accent when you knew her?
not very often, but I think occasionally if you went to Yorkshire, it would come out a little bit. But I'm looking at her publicist. She loved fish and chips in the Dorchester, covered in, and she would call for malt vinegar, which of course they were like, yes, of course, what is that? And she loved pink champagne, and she just loved life. So that was partly why she was such a joy to spend time with. Where she would have tea with the editorial assistants from work and remember their names and ask them about their, day-to-day jobs, doing the most mundane typing and filing at that point.
But she'd have found that interesting, though.
Yeah.
It's like that's much more interesting to her, like what that girl's going to do, woman is going to do with her life. And I think quite often why certain books succeed is they are about women's lives. And women's lives, if we all just wrote down one thing, the most extraordinary thing that had happened to all of us, we would be here for weeks, and Jane could interview all of us and get it. Because this is a book that is, no one goes to the moon. It's about stuff that happened to women the other time.
Yes.
My granny was illegitimate. She was born in a small village in the Lake District. She trained to be a nurse. I don't know how she did. And I look at young women today and I think, how would you have got out of that small village and become a nurse? I don't think your life is as easy to have now. And the drama of women's lives is so immense. And that's why writing about women's lives and writing full stop is so interesting to me, and why I like my job more than family holidays. I'm a really great mother, by the way. I just do, I really love, I want
And
to
it's
be at my
so
desk.
interesting you say that, because I watched the first episode last week with a great friend who I've known since university. And as we started watching it, she said, oh, my dad was illegitimate. His mother, my grandmother, was a skivvy in a big house. His father was the man of the house and not named on his birth certificate. I was like, I've known you for 40 years and I never knew that. Oh my God. Yeah. And then Brenda Blethyn in the cast Q&A said her mum was a skivvy and her dad was a chauffeur, and she loved it. She loved filming it partly for that reason. And when Emma is dropping pennies into the bottle to save, she's like, that's what life was like for me as a girl. We had to save for everything. You couldn't buy something unless you'd saved the money up first. So I think you're right. If you scratch the surface, there's a universality to this story and to what Emma is experiencing and what she wants to achieve that really does still resonate, plus loving the camp 1970s New York as an escape.
Is there a contemporary Barbara Taylor Bradford who is writing novels on that scale now?
I think that is a really good question, and one that's quite hard to answer. Thank you, Jane.
Sorry.
I mean, I think because we have almost felt like the big epic family saga, with that kind of sweeping dynastic story, and then that I do think that is someone like Harry is reinventing it with a kind of darker slant and digging deeper and putting in those kind of dark themes of betrayal and secrets and how they resonate through the ages, and very much in the vein of the Cazalet Chronicles or something like that. But
Thank you.
It does feel like we're all ready to lose ourselves in something really absorbing and sweeping, and also in a funny kind of way. I know your latest one is in the 50s, and of course, really strangely, now as someone whose parents got married in the 50s feels like such a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was post-war, and the country felt very different, and there was still rationing, and so I also think we're almost ready to look at 70s, 60s, 50s as almost sort of historical periods and find fascination in that. And Mad Men, of course, did that brilliantly. Yeah.
And also an escape from now, I think, is
An escape from now is a.
I think for me that was very much what that was about. It was like,
Yes, you can breathe,
You could
breathe out and
absolutely
know that you're just going
lose
to enjoy
yourself.
it out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that dark things weren't happening and people were, people were making mistakes and it's all going to go horribly wrong, but not in the way that we feel like it's going to go wrong today.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was a gift that you've got the dual timeline, and I get that that's also a challenge, but it makes it feel pacier and it makes it feel more vibrant, and you don't sort of feel like you're just stuck in the aspic of the past. Yeah.
And it makes it very emotional, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I just think, those scenes where Brenda's so brilliantly, it's later in the series actually, probably rather than the first few episodes, but where she's looking back over her life and she's thinking about being young, and just there's nothing more emotional, I think, actually, as you sort of reach older age, where you kind of look back and think about your younger years and what you could have done and what you should have done and what you did do and what you're proud of, and the kind of
those moments where you
back.
could have taken a different path, or you can see her absolutely feeling it right in her core.
I have one last question before we wrap it up, Lynn, and it's to you. What would Barbara have thought the new series and where we are today?
Furious.
I think she would be thrilled. I mean, as some of us know, she arrived in London in 2019 after Bob's death, and she called a whole set of meetings specifically to get this series moving, because there was interest in it. Obviously, Poldark had happened, Downton had happened, but I think she and Bob had seen that Poldark had shown you could remake something that was much loved and beautifully done in its time, but could be redone extremely well. So after he died, she picked up the baton and she flew into London, and she called meetings with, I think, the Forge and Curtis Brown, and said, I want this to happen. And as you've said, I mean, it stalled slightly during COVID, but you did get to meet her. And I think she was delighted that she did then sign the contracts that meant it was going ahead before she died.
We were so thrilled that she was able to be involved in those early kind of drafts of that first script, and she was so sort of supportive of it and so generous with her kind of time and her praise of it, and we know that she was really pleased that it was going to Channel 4 back to its kind of original home, and she was really determined that it would be shot in Yorkshire, which we would have honoured anyway, but we're very much conscious of it.
She'd have absolutely loved that. And ultimately, I mean, and Liz will bear this out as well, she was a pragmatist, so she might watch it and think, that's not how I wrote it, or that's not how a maid would behave in whatever circumstance. But she wouldn't say anything, because she was such a practical, go-getting doer, and she'd have just loved the fact it was back on our TV screens, getting great numbers, and splashed across every bit of media you can pick up or watch. So I think
So it's done really well in the ratings, hasn't it?
It really has, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't quite understand the sort of figures of it all, but Channel 4 seemed delighted. Well, I'm starting to. I'm trying to. I did this time last week. I did, and now I do a bit more.
Now I have it here.
And it does seem to have done really well. Yeah, they do seem thrilled with.
Huge congrats to you, Katherine.
Well,
thank you to all of you for being here. We celebrate Barbara, and we celebrate a woman of substance, and its whole new life back on our screens again. Cheers. Here's to Barbara.
Cheers.